Hey, what's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me. In today's video, we're going to learn how to paint these beautiful lily pads from start to finish. Actually, if you've seen the latest live stream, I started the process there, but this time I also added that final wash to finalize and make it look beautiful. This is a great process if you're struggling with, you're looking at all the details and you're almost getting too stuck on trying to portray every single thing you see. This will help you to take a step back and rely more on your instincts, and by doing that, actually getting a better result, and most importantly, a result that is uniquely your own, and no one else they cannot attribute it to in the style of whatever. It's going to be uniquely yours. Do check out, if you like this, the frustration-free watercolor course. It's going to show you how to let go, get the results you want with watercolor painting. But without further ado, let's jump into the process. So now here, there's going to be shadow. This is interesting. There's going to be shadow here, so I almost don't have to paint over it because there's going to be a layer above it. But doing a first wash now can actually help me with mapping out where the lily pads are, because I'm not using any masking stuff here, I'm just painting. It can help me a lot with mapping out where the lily pads are, and in turn, for the next layers, it's going to really help me find my bearing for the shadows. So that's what I'm going to do. I just want to make sure I start really, really light and watery. So we'll do that. This is, by the way, extra space. What you see here, I should cut this off, but it's fine. So I'm painting around these supposed lily pads, and unless I work larger size, there isn't really much to, like, I'm not gonna go around every individual one, and I didn't even draw every individual one. The way I'm gonna do this is quite random, just placing them in. Now the closer I get, the more I'll actually paint around sketches that I put down, if that makes sense. See, the closer we get, the clearer and the more specific the drawing becomes. So I'm really improvising in terms of the lilies I paint around, the pads, rather, I paint around. Sometimes that may end up being too many highlights because you didn't draw them and you're so eager to paint around highlights. That can end up being quite a multitude of them, whereas you don't need them. Now, one more thing to have in mind, we can always come back with opaque paint and add pads, change things up, improve the composition. Nothing is set in stone, and you can correct pretty much everything. You really can. Okay, now as we move down, I'm actually gonna lighten it up because I'm almost gonna use clean water here because it does start quite light. And notice how using this very watery wash also allows me a lot of time to map out the shapes and not be too worried about the paint drying. That's another thing. That's just the nature of watercolor. The more water, that's physics, I guess, or materials, I don't know, material science. Just the more water it is, the longer it's going to stay wet. So it's one of those things that can really help. You can't really go around it unless you're using stuff like glycerine to help the water stay wet for longer, which I have tried a few times. It works really well. So now, and one thing you can do is just grab the paper, change the angle to make sure the water flows better. You have more reaction time. And we're starting with almost clean water. it looks like there is some paint there, but it's gonna dry much lighter. It's gonna be barely noticeable. But what it does is help us again map those lilies. And as I move down, I'm going to start dipping into the reservoir, slightly darker paint down below, but start very gradually. I'm going to start gradually. You can do it however you want, really. This is quite a good scene for beginners too, I would say. It's not that difficult to get something out of it. I wouldn't say like you'll necessarily get something super good, but you will be able to get something out of it. And as we move closer, actually don't care much about the colors being exactly the same or even similar for that matter. I'm just looking to see the pattern of the scene so that I can better paint it once I work on it in a large size. So I'm quite rough around the edges, let's say, in how I execute the painting here. Is there a small pad here? I think there is. And now as we get to the darker colors, we're starting to be a little more challenged by the shapes and the flow. Now you can decide to finish this in multiple washes, so you can decide that this wash is going to be just lighter than the final one, if you want to. The current balance I have, I think, leads to a good balance of flow and value as of this second. Colors I'm using are quite random, by the way. As soon as I'm finished with this wash, I'm gonna look at your comments. Sorry about it's just a bit hard to do both, so. And you can even imagine or mimic the cloud skies. Some of them are visible, and it comes to play in the form of darker and lighter areas. But if you push it too much, you're gonna start struggling with the flow, and that's something I want to avoid. So I'm gonna have to carve through these shapes real fast. And I may decide, by the way, you know, based on this, it will inform my technique on the final piece, so I may decide to use masking fluid or just put tape on the painting for the larger version. I may decide sometimes to not work on a larger version once I'm done. Like, okay, it's not that interesting of a scene, I'm not that interested in it, and I'm just not gonna paint it. That can happen too. By the way, one more thing you can do is start lighter, like this, with a bit more flow, and then darken. You don't have to go as dark directly. Start light, and then come back with darker paint. And add that in, right? But the thing, to me, the thing that's important about this little experiment is that I just become passively more familiar with the scene. I don't have to do anything really, I just have to passively experience painting it once. So this is what we've got, first wash. Now, just for fun, we can actually start painting some of these lily pads, because we're now killing time to get this fully dried. We can just paint. So, I have my specialty May green here. It's one of the more beautiful greens I have. It's in the not Van Gogh palette. What palette is this? I don't even remember. Yeah, I don't remember what paint brand this is. It's not the Paul Rubens one either. But I have this really nice green here. You can see it on. I just dropped my water sprayer, which is important, so I'm not gonna let it escape. So you see this green? This is gonna help our lily pads have more prominence. So I'm just gonna go for it. It's gonna be fun. Let's just put those in using this nice little green. Now, one thing to remember, this should be lighter than the water. Now I may end up darkening the water. probably, some spots at least. So let's keep this one light for now. And one thing you'll notice is, and then I can do some wet and wet just to bring in more paint, but what you'll notice is that there are some yellows, even reds around it, but I'm just gonna keep it to a bit of yellow here and there. There we go, my very not clean wells. Something like that. Now it's okay to have a bit of a white gap, I'm not gonna obsess over it here. This is kind of a prep painting again, so whatever comes out of it, comes out of it. But just for fun, you can do a lot of variation in the color, it'll look great. One thing that will make it look better is we're gonna add shadows under these lilies. There are some shadows under them. Now for this one, I'm just gonna keep it probably the same green. It looks a little more artificial, the color itself, so you can even add a bit of a touch of phthalo blue, make it even more of that artificial color. One thing I may end up doing with the water is glazing over them with even neutral tint could work, because it will also get them a little more muted, just a touch. It will be easier to do because I already know where I should paint, because I already mapped out all of these shadows. But you can actually tell, you know, from afar, this starts to look, I wouldn't say photorealistic, but it does start to look realistic. The realistic impression starts being created. If I zoom out a bit, you will notice it. See, it starts to read as something. Color nuances do play a role, you know? You can ditch all of that, of course, and just paint black and white, which I love doing. You know, it's much easier to do sometimes. But if you are using colors, it is a great tool to tell a lot more of the story, if that makes sense. I'm gonna bring in a bit of ultramarine here, actually, because this feels a little quieter as a green, if that makes sense. The value of all of the water lilies is going to be quite similar. Again, surprise, surprise, because it does look a little different, but that's just that same optical illusion. Some of them, the farther ones, some of them are actually darker, if I'm not mistaken. Let me test that out again. Yeah, so these are a little darker than these ones, but that's fine. There we go. Looks quite accurate to me, maybe a little more neutral actually. So you see how I neutralize? I just bring in a bit of green to neutralize the orange. It's just a fast way to do it. Still doesn't feel right. What am I missing here? Let's try to go a little more yellow. Sometimes it's just, you know, you mix and nothing looks like the thing you're looking at. It's a good one. What is that color? Is it just some kind of an orangey muted color? I think it is. I think it is, so this should be good. So I'm gonna place that color in. Yeah, that looks fine. And then, as soon as I'm done with that, see, even my brushwork isn't that graceful here. I'm just kind of going for it. And then I'm gonna use a neutral tint to get all the rest of the gray lilies in place. These are just gray, believe it or not. There we go. So these are essentially painted together. So a bit less of an edge. The edge will be defined by a shadow that I will add later on. And off we go. A bit more of that neutral tint. Yeah, it has a bit of warmth to it, but that's fine. And we're just gonna start mapping out these grays. Now, what's gonna happen is, and that's the interesting phenomenon here, it at some point, these will start looking darker than the water. Because the water shifts from light to dark. That's going to be a fun little effect. Yep. Yeah, that's good. That's a good neutral. The neutral tint. It actually works well here. Here's another one. Now, honestly, if I wouldn't film this, I would move the palette and do this. Be a little more accurate. But I don't know how entertaining it is to just keep seeing my hair in the camera. But yeah. And gonna continue. Now you see here, it's gonna start appearing darker than the water. And that's perfectly fine. That is what we're looking for. That's where the impression reverses. I think, looking at the time, we'll do another one, the Venice scene, but we'll just go a little faster with that. That's what I think we'll do. Because I do want to get another one. This is not a lily pad, this is actually a shadow, reflection, sorry. And you see how I'm gonna add a bit of green to that gray. I don't know why it feels right. The one on the left, which I weighted with, also has a bit of green in it. This one, if I'm not mistaken. Could be orange though. Sometimes I confuse the two, believe it or not. And only once I put them on paper I realized whether it's one or the other. And sorry, I'm gonna look at some of your, again, messages in a second. Just want to make sure I get this right. There we go. If you really want to, you know, you can lift the excess paint here. Where the water is, you can make corrections if you see fit. And let us continue with these other pads. Have quite a lot of interesting nuances around them that once we start putting in the reflection, you're gonna see. It's gonna look really, really good. Now I don't want to go too dark here. I want to make sure, because these pads start to face the light. They're similar value, but not the exact same one. So let me confirm that. Yeah, these are just a touch lighter. Whatever I do, I don't want to go darker. That's for sure. So I'm just gonna be a little careful there with the values. Now these farther ones you can just get with one swipe of the brush. That's the advantage of being accustomed to your brush and having a decent brush. You can really just with small minimal swipes of it get the shape you want in, just based on technique. You don't need to fill in the lines and all of that. You just put 1, 2, 3, boom, boom, boom. Yeah. Now this still looks weird because I haven't added in the reflection. Once I add a reflection, it's gonna make much more sense. Which tells me, by the way, I could have covered the whole thing with the green of the water and just darken it with another layer once done. By the way, lesson learned for this scene. So it's a good thing I'm doing this prep. One more thing, I get a feeling this is going to be a good painting larger. So I'm quite looking forward to trying to paint it. So yeah. Now I went a little lighter for these farther ones. Just going to gently paint them in real fast. Done. I think we're done with placing the lily pads. Once I don't want to go too dark because that will force me to go dark with the reflections too. Let's continue. So for the reflection, as promised, I'm gonna go whoop like that. Now I do want to make sure this is dry, so I'm gonna start. The one thing I want to pay attention to is notice especially for this section right here, I want to be accurate because it's isolated. I want it to be dark enough also to be darker than the lilies, but not too dark. So then this is a great way to test it out because it's a smaller area. Now the green I'm gonna do now is gonna be probably too green. So I will need to mute it down. Let's try, I'm curious to see what this sap green will produce. That's actually quite close. So I'm gonna use convenience mixture here. Just a sap, good old sap green, make my life a lot easier. This is so close enough that I'll just use that. This is gonna be a perfect example of how 70% accurate even is pretty good. Now I can add a bit of neutral tint to neutralize it a bit more. And we will go with that. So let's see. Now there are ripples. I'm actually quite zoomed in on my photo because I want to get this right. And this is a small area, so I have the privilege of going super slow. And if you really pay attention, here it touches the lily underneath, and here there's a gap between the lily and the thing, so it goes like that. And then we have some other ripples here, and this goes towards this direction, and it does not touch it here. So that would be a first step, right? We're going slow. Let me put this here so I can see your chat. This is going to be the strangest stage of them all. Now we can even start putting in the shadows under the lilies, and these go in a pattern of almost zigzag. The reason why, can you tell? If you've been around lily pads, you can probably tell. Their edges are a little wavy, and that actually makes the effect of the shadows looking wavy too. I'm taking the risk now because I may want to darken the water later on, but I'm just going for it now and we'll see. Worst case, I'll darken the water over these shadows and everything, and it's still gonna work. Shadow here is flat because that's the cut part of the lily pad. I'm not sure what you call that. But you see all of these patterns, they look a little strange right now. But once you see them in their final shape, it will make a lot of sense, trust me. Yeah, so I'm gonna stop for now with this section. Let's continue here. Get this jagged shadow, straight line, jagged shadow. There is these nice little jagged shadows in between. And at this point, I'm not seeing how accurate I am. Okay, I'm not seeing that yet. That is fine. You paint what you see. Then once you flip it upside down, it may make sense, it may not make sense. To me, it makes sense. Once you see it in the grand context of everything, it will make perfect sense. And I think I'll leave the water as is. Just, you know, I do want to be able to paint another one, but it does seem like we may not be able to, depending on how absorbed I'll end up being in this process in particular. So we have a shadow here. And here we're starting to seriously make this shadow larger. So I'm gonna need more paint and a lot of belief. Let's see what we can get away with here. So this goes here. I do need this to be darker than the lilies themselves. That's the thing. That's the so-called issue here. Because I need this to read as a reflection that's darker than them. There we go. And then here we have these, and look at what happens here. I'm actually gonna let's go with the shapes I'm seeing. So I'm gonna just follow the shapes here. There's a green shape, and then there's a more neutral blue shape, believe it or not. And then there's a warm shape too. So let me dip into my warmth for a second here. Like, this tower is warm. And I'm gonna forget about flow for a few seconds, because if I now focus on making sure everything flows, I'm gonna lose it. There's no way I can get that to happen. So these are the types of compromises one makes in the painting process. Now, it doesn't have to be a compromise, by the way. This is just a way to paint more effectively. This goes a little greener. I do want it to be quite similar to what I'm seeing, which is why I'm taking my time. Then we have this tower here. I would have taken my time much more had this been a larger, more detailed painting. And this is where we get to this stage. Now I am going to switch over to a gray blue for this section that looks a little gray blue, and hopefully it will end up reading accurately. So we'll do that. Again, I'm dropping the idea of having a smooth flowy wash here, because if I focus on that, I just will it just won't happen, and that is okay. Now a little bit of warmth underneath here. So I'm almost painting like almost like in oils or acrylics. You know, I'm mixing and then placing in a color. Now we'll go back to the green. We have a large green area here, and now I'm just gonna skip the pads without thinking about where there's a white gap around and where there's not, because if I do start thinking about that, once again, I have no shot. So green, neutral tint, and we'll just go for it. Try and get rid of some of these annoying light gaps. Using a way too big of a brush in theory. For this, the reason I'm using it is, if I don't, I'm screwed, pretty much. Now here we have a section that will make our lives a lot easier. And that's because that's one, that's two, yeah. Over here, this is dark, but everything else is light. Let me show you. Once we get there, you'll see. But you see, there's no way around that kind of a wash. You just paint it. You just paint it and hope for the best, really. So, luckily for me, see what happens here? There's the reflection goes lighter there. Now, I've done this enough times to know that I'm probably okay. I'm doing okay, even though I don't see it yet, because it's upside down. There's a lot of different weird variables involved. I know my instinct tells me, you know what, it's pretty close. I may be wrong. Once we'll turn this upside down, we'll discover. But I don't know. I feel like we're okay. We'll see now. If anything, I may go a little too dark here without noticing and realizing, but we'll see. I can rotate it a bit to make it easier to paint around all of these lilies. I'm torturing myself here. There we go. And it seems to go all the way down. It's just a little wavy, and that's something I forgot. There we go. Good, so now, if I turn this upside down, it should begin to work, you see? Now, I stopped the wash in the middle, and that is fine. Let's continue it, and it's gonna tell a fuller story. So what am I seeing here? I see a bit of that neutral blue. I'm gonna have to move the phone for a second. Sorry, I don't see any of what you're saying right now. My apologies. So yeah, a bit of that neutral bluish section there. I'm seeing quite a bit of that color. So one good trick I can tell you, if you see a color repeating many places, you can just place it in one go. Yeah, that is pretty accurate. So, I'm gonna be right here. May have to be a little darker though, we'll see. That's kind of a loose color I'm seeing there, then it goes a little lighter. I see it also here. There's quite a bit of gray around these. I'm somewhat micromanaging myself right now where I shouldn't, but that's fine. I just want to see where this kind of leads me. There's a bit of that blue again. I would probably lift a bit of this blue. There we go. Go back to this green, close up these little corners here. Yeah. Now, same muted blue is really present. So there's a gap, and here it starts. So we have this weird little thing, a little more on the blue side actually. There we go. Now, like, am I looking at the correct pedal or not? It looks like I may be, but let's see here. Then this goes up here. One thing you could do is just paint the whole thing with one color, save yourself some trouble. I am trying to kind of experiment and see if I can capture the nuances of color too. Not easy. It's not easy. But let's see. So there's a bit of red there. Like this. And I'm gonna improvise now. I feel like improvising. So that's gonna be green. Left side, I'm just gonna do this as green actually. So green, green, green. Switch over to a larger brush because I need a lot of paint here. A little more neutral, a little more of that. I don't know what these marks are, by the way. I have no idea. You know, this is them from time to time. It's the ghost of my palette. Yeah. There we go. There's a bit of this here. Let's just try and visualize. I didn't even put some of the lilies here, but that's fine. Let's see if I can almost wing the overall pattern and have it read as something. I really want to get this one done and move on to the second one. And also read some of your messages because I'm totally not there. There we go. Okay. And remember, one more thing again, you can definitely get a lot of the highlights lost, the shapes that are inaccurate, and get a lot of them back just by using opaque paint. So again, nothing is really lost. It's not the end of the world. If something doesn't feel right, that's okay. I'm gonna add a bit of warmth here just because I feel like it. I feel like you can do a lot of interesting plays here. With the colors within the this is the light, so I'm gonna keep that light. Ooh, there's a bit of warmth here that's quite interesting. So let's see. Here and here too. It's a bit wavy, and then it goes in a straight line. Wavy here, maybe here, and almost done. Just gonna close off a few gaps. It's gonna be a mess because I went really fast and really literal with the colors and the variations there. That's fine. And we're gonna close this gap off here. The key thing is that we have a reflection or a, you know, big shadow in the water compared to everything that goes above. That's the main thing you want to show here. There's a bit of warmth too, so I'm going to include that. Just go like this with a bit of water, flip it over, and that makes sense to me. Now ignore this part because it's not supposed to be here even. I'm going to just cut it off. There we go. That's what Van Gogh said. I'm just going to cut it off. There we go. And there you have it. And by the way, once I flip it upside down, I can see, oh, this isn't dark enough, and that's why it reads a little strange. Like this part, everything here should be darker. So if I just go back with a bit of this neutral blue right around here and darken it like so. And here too, by the way. I don't even care that it's still a bit wet. And here as well. Here too. Here as well. This should be blue. Darker blue. This should be kind of a neutral thing. And you can slowly push it to look more like the thing, right? And you can come back now. Let me give you a cool example. Let's say you didn't even paint the lilies here. You can go with something like this beautiful green, pale green by Shinhan PWC. Mix it up here with a bit of other paints, and you can get back your occasional green lily pad just by, you know, painting it over, just as an example, right? I'm not gonna do that obviously now for like a full-scale thing, but you see some of these lighter green lilies laying around there. So that's one way you can bring back so many of these interesting highlights very easily. You don't have to use just transparent watercolors and just one type of process and just work light to dark and just do this and just do that. None of that matters. By the way, I completely ignored this thing here. I don't even know, is that a kind of a lotus leaf thing? I don't know. But we shall add it in and leave the center a little lighter to convey. That's the part that pops out of the water, so it's a little lighter, and boom, we're done. Yeah, I think this one is almost done. The one thing, yeah, I almost called it done, but the one thing that's left, truly, the last thing is the shadows under the other pads. So if I were to use the same muted sap green and black, I'll do it real fast. You'll get, you know, these kinds of shadows. Again, jagged, diagonal shadows that look fantastic and make it read like something on the surface of the water, right? You can already tell. Look at this here. This is very interesting. There's a shadow and a highlight next to it. Shadow, and just out of laziness sake, a highlight above it, like so. You see this? Very gentle. But these small effects all accumulate and end up looking like something. And then of course we have to justify the shadow underneath here. Here this leaf is folded almost up, so we have a larger piece of shadow, goes in here. See these little folds? All of this, and you can start adding nuance to the actual lilies if you want to. So for example, some of them, okay, this waviness, right? Let's go with a bit of a green here. Just show you really fast. Yeah, so where it goes up, there's a shadow next to it, indicating the waviness of the leaf, right? So I'm gonna do this. Maybe blend out the edge a bit. Find it very challenging for some reason. I think there's a bit of opaque paint in it, but hopefully that makes sense, right? You get to see the waviness. That's the point of showing you this. And if you go over all of these different pads, just add all of these shadows and highlights. I am definitely gonna paint this large. I definitely will do this. Because it looks so fun, and there's a bit of a thing here. Completely forgot about that. Something coming out of the water and its reflection. Here as well. But yeah, I mean, this is pretty much done. I like it a lot. Okay, so the only thing that's left to do here is basically darken the water. I'm gonna do another go at it. This is to enhance mainly the contrast around the lower section. I'm not doing this to... a bit of water here. I'm not doing this to change anything here up here, this should stay the same, actually. So I have to be careful. I'm going to start with the easiest way to do a gradual transition from dark to light is to start with the light. Start with the light and gradually darken only around here. Now, while darkening, I also want to make this a little bluer, because it is a little bluer in the photo, and a little neutral. Okay, so pretty much less green. So I have here neutral tint and a bit of French ultramarine. We'll have to test it out. Let me get some new test paper here. We'll have to test it out and see what it looks like over the existing paint. Sometimes you won't know exactly until you put the paint in. So we'll get to it. I'll have to zoom in a bit with my face, so I'll talk less, but let's get through it. It's a fast wash. Now I'm starting to feed it with, not just clean water, but it's still, I'm gonna paint over this lily pad, but it's still quite clear, okay? And then as I move down around here, the secret, quote unquote, is really in how gradual you can go. Now there's a lot of improvements that you can still do here. I'll probably just leave it at that after I finish this wash. I'm not looking to change too much here. Sometimes also tilting the paper just a bit will make it easier for us to get the shapes accurately. The main reason we're even doing it to begin with is to enhance the contrast with these pads here at the bottom. So that's where you want to make sure it's dark enough. That's the whole point of doing this. While also neutralizing the color of the water a bit. Yes, that too. But you see, it's a pretty straightforward wash. You just have to do it. That's the thing. It's pretty much the same all throughout, but I have a feeling this is that final push it needs to get that realistic impression down finally, as it should appear. If you're after some level of accuracy, that's that final push that this painting needs. Again, you can start improving the reflections and all of that, but I just want the overall thing to read well, and I think with that, once this section here dries, it's going to be just the right contrast. Now, if I were to start, improving things up here, what I would do is pretty much with the same approach. So I'm seeing things that are darker here. I'll just get the paint that I feel like is most accurate. To me, it feels like a warm neutral actually here. So I'd go with the neutral tint with a bit of this Windsor red, maybe, or maybe I'll keep it gray. And then I'll just start, darkening within the shadows, okay? Again, I'm saying I won't do that. I'm just showing you like bits and pieces of how I would push this to be a little more true to the source. Now here it stops getting darker, so I'm gonna stop around here, continue around here, and that's how I will convey this little structure and architecture. The whole idea with these kinds of paintings where there's a massive amount of details, and it really is a bit complex, is to gradually push it towards more and more of the accurate impression you're after. If you can, I'm not going to say really be patient, because it's not about patience necessarily, but if you can just go through the steps that it takes to get it to look more like the reference photo, you'll do really well. You'll do really well, and everything that stops you from doing that is some kind of an obstacle along the way. But yeah, this is pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this one. We'll share a final scan too with it signed and everything. I hope this was useful. I think it's a pretty interesting process to look at because it does bring together a lot of elements that are important for watercolor painting, but in a pretty accessible way. You can just go for it and really be a little direct, as I've been enjoying with this, just seeing the color, putting it there, especially with this section right here. And you can take your time with opaque paint and improve and change it as much as you want, but you don't have to, you know. It all depends on the end result and your end vision, what you're seeing. That goes beyond everything. If you're looking at something and it does nothing for you, you feel zero amount of being compelled to paint it, just don't, you know. But if you do feel compelled to paint, if something in you does want to, for example, I'm looking at it now real fast and I'm like, oh, there's actually a really cool reflection up here that I want to get. So again, because this isn't meant to be like a final piece, this was more of a study piece. But if it were a final piece, look at this beautiful detail up here, this wavy little reflection that just looks really, really good. And the more you can include these, the better the impression. You see already it starts to look like maybe water ripples. Even if you include another one slightly thicker around here, it's gonna improve the pattern of a ripple. You know, all of these things. What are you seeing? What do you want to convey? And thank you. So I hope again this was helpful. I'm starting to ramble on. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to everyone who supports me over on Patreon. Could not thank you enough. You allow me, give me a lot more confidence in what I do and allow me to do the thing I love most for a living. So thank you so much for that. And we'll catch you in the next vid. Till next time, take care.